and making sure everything works properly. I'm just waiting to see and make sure that we're on all
It says
five.
says we're live.
Right. I'm just checking for the last one, and we are good, as they might say, 5 by 5. So, in a few minutes, probably about 3 or 4, Terry and I, at the top of an hour, will talk about things, stuff, and in a rare cycle, Terry has provided not only last week's topic for discussion, but also this week's topic for discussion.
I love how you portray me as somebody who does nothing but just show up at the last minute, as if that's what really happens.
It's happened more often.
Look, you knew what you were getting when you invited me to do this. But today we're going to talk about what about when you make a mistake. It's possible you made a mistake choosing me for your partner, and it's possible I made one by saying yes. Who knows?
There's some validity to the potentials in that statement. But no, really, I think this is a good topic. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. It's valuable.
Well, we know Chris Emerson turned you down, is why I'm here. So,
yeah, that's it. My hair can't be in the same space as his hair on a regular basis because my hair is this way. But really, no. In a few minutes, we'll be able to step into our larger discussion. But it is good to have a few folks dropping in already. I know there'll probably be some more. Things that somebody from Florida says, is this do the work or do the Terry? That's a 1970s dance move, and nobody wants to see that.
Nobody wants to see me dance. I guarantee you that.
Well, there's some more accuracy there.
Or the guy from Florida who asked the question. Let me just throw that out there.
I don't know. Chris Farley did a pretty good job.
Yes, Shane as the motivator would be perfect.
Yes. He's this close to living in a van down the river.
Yes, the Hillsborough River. It's good stuff.
Terry, here's a quick question for you. If there is one song that you could be on the album as a vocalist for, what would it be?
As a vocalist? Wow. Well, there's a lot of options out there. Probably on the Les Mis soundtrack, which is my favorite musical, and not what you're thinking, because I've already performed that one. Rather well, I might add.
Too late.
Yeah.
I already figured that one
out. Yeah. I love the song Confrontation. And I would love to be Javert, which is the bass lead. Mm-hmm. Jason Purcell did that when we were at FC, when we did Les Mis music. Did a great job, but I was a little envious that, I was always typecasted in those gigs, which is why I ended up as the master of the house. But that Javert song just grabs me every time. It's fantastic. Next to that, by the way, next to that would be "Bring Him Home," which is like the tenor song. So I mean, I have a wide range. I don't know if I could pull off Valjean and "Bring Him Home," but another beautiful song. It's a great soundtrack. If you've not listened to that, or if you've not seen, see the movie, but if you can ever see it live, fantastic.
Yeah, the original cast are tremendous in each of their roles.
Oh, so good.
Jean Valjean is, as a character type throughout the entire movie, is excellent. The moral dilemma that he goes through and his spiritual cleansing, as well as everybody else in those conflicts. And I wouldn't mind being the counterpart to that particular confrontation piece. I don't know if I can get the tenor role, though. My baritone voice doesn't have that kind of leap and range.
I would switch with you and do the tenor, but I just don't want to, because that Javert, just when he begins, it's just grabs you. It's just, it's so powerful.
Yeah. I would probably pick something for myself from Tower of Power's catalog, and maybe pick What Is Hip or You're Still a Young Man, and try to reach that one. Although any Journey piece would probably work as well.
Like another one would be "Simple Man" by Leonard Skinner for me. That's always a good vibe. Like My kids and I have spent a lot of time driving down the road singing that together. So that's a tough question, man. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a fun one too. I think that's one of the things I try to do is make sure the questions aren't just probative to our personal emotive state, but really kind of like have some joy to it. I think we need a lot of that in life. Right now, though, we're going to talk about one of my favorite aspects of getting better, and it's actually the most painful one. And really, I think this particular subject is a hard thing to swallow in the big sense. We're going to narrow down the focus just a second, but I'll be confessional for a moment. Drove down to Florida and back, and I listened to 3, and now I've actually added a 4th sermon since then of my own that I listened to, recent sermons. And it is literally the hardest thing to sit through, I think, for most people, to listen to your own voice.
Oh, it's so painful.
Lessons. But I'll tell you, every single mistake that I made in those last 4 recent sermons are highlighted in my head with the hope of not doing it again. Very simple. Every time I would say, every time the audio would get a little soft, every time that what I wrote on the page isn't the way that I said it. We're talking about someone who's maybe too much of a hyper-perfectionist in some areas. But
yeah, I've never worried about things that much to listen to myself and go back and correct. I just the pain of listening to yourself on a recording is worse than being wrong again. But that gets to our topic today.
But it makes you better. And if you want to get better, learn what you sound like. And that's a separate episode. And certainly I think maybe we can talk about that in the future. But that's not our focus right here. This is a little bit narrower, but also bigger. All of us are going to, at some point, confidently do stupid and confidently do a failed thing. And I commented about 2 weeks ago, both publicly on a couple of social posts, but also in this broadcast. Many of the times where I have had to go to apologize to someone begin in some way in my head with, this sounds funny. And then I say the stupid. And then I have to come back later and say, I'm sorry I was stupid.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. Jerry, this is, as I joked earlier, a suggestion that came from your side of the table. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, I tell people all the time I've got a PhD in stupid. I've perfected that over the years. And, I think one of the things to realize before we go any further is we're going to mess things up. Like, I deal with this with my kids a lot, especially with my middle child who's a perfectionist and a soccer player, that, she can make 8 fantastic saves, but if she lets one go through, then she spends, the entire time being angry about that. And, it's a lot easier to say to her, you're going to make mistakes. Like, you're going to let the ball go sometimes. You're not going to make every save. You're not going to do everything right. And so I think one of the things to realize is it's not if we make a mistake, but when you make a mistake, you're going to mess up. And by the way, this is a thing I think one of my things to think about here is this is an important topic from an individual basis, but it's also an important topic from a corporate kind of perspective for churches, that even as congregations, there's times we make mistakes, that leaders get together. We make our best judgment to do something, and it doesn't go like we thought it would go. And what do you do in those situations? How do you move forward when that's the case? And I think that's really important to think about. So you got to go into life realizing you're going to face this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think
and if you're a preacher, especially, you need to realize that. Look, Phil, how long was it when you started preaching until you said something stupid from the pulpit or the lectern in a Bible class? Like, I think for me, it was week 1.
I have a tape of my first invitation. Somewhere in my archives, I have the audio cassette of my first invitation. It is the illustration of saying something stupid day 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
It may have been melted by now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Here's the thing. In the top tiers of academic, athletic, military, corporate, governmental worlds, there is built within a culture of extreme accountability, especially in some of the elite units of the United States military, that you are responsible for your parts. And if you fail your part, you take immediate accountability for it, not because you are a failure, but because success matters enough to acknowledge your mistake and acknowledge your accountability to it so you don't do it again. And so our first half of our conversation is being honest with yourself. And so on the basic level, that level of personal accountability, that this is me, I made this mistake, is the only interrogation you can do on the inside that will ensure the likelihood of not doing it again. You could not do it out of fear or not do it out of compassion, but if you really don't want to do it again, you've got to accept this was my mistake and how it happened.
Let me illustrate this. Let me illustrate this in a way that I think everybody can get. All of us at some point, especially parents, have sat next to our kids and we've been out to dinner somewhere. We pick up a glass of water or something, and somehow we move our arm or do something. It hits a kid or hits something a kid put somewhere, and we spill the glass of water. What's our response usually in those situations? Look what you made me do, right? Like we blame it on somebody else. We blame it on the kids. When you see somebody just completely dump a glass of water at dinner, you hardly anybody go, man, I just did that. I'm a complete klutz. Our first thing is to find somebody else to blame. And that's how we are. That's just a perfect example of how we are all the time. And the reality is, you were the one holding the glass of water. Doesn't matter what happened. You actually spilled the glass of water. Even if the person next to you hit you in some way, you're the one that held the glass of water. Okay? So, very rarely is that something that wasn't an involvement from your part that is something that tells you are a part of this. So we take that same mentality to everything else. And when we talk about being honest with yourself, that's really what we're talking about. Look in the mirror and go, I did this.
Yeah. I'll add this. As easily the least graceful part of the Martin household. Like I'm the one who trips and falls over stuff more than anybody
I thought
else.
That was James.
No.
He's just the one that doesn't bathe enough. That's what James is.
Also not accurate. The real thing, though, is I'm more likely to get injured. I'm more likely to fall and complain about my injuries in that dynamic. But realistically, I think it's just you can move it on an emotional level too. We don't emotionally, as a human, deal well with our failure. And we can look at some biblical illustrations. You talk about Cain and Abel, real failure. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Am I my brother's keeper? Adam and Eve. Wait a minute. The woman thou gavest me. The serpent gave it to me and I ate it.
Pass the blame around.
Even move forward into the kings of Israel. Do all the same stuff.
Saul with the Amalekites. No, the people wanted to offer sacrifices. I had nothing to do with this.
Right.
Yeah.
And Josh Reeves points out, we've got a number of quick comments too, but Josh points out, talking about your failures to your kids doesn't make you less, it makes them better. 100% of the time. Especially if you can articulate how you grew because you learned from your mistake. How you can clearly illustrate to them, look, this was my mistake, but this is what God did with what was left of the mess that I made. Those kind of moments are big.
Yeah, there's been a lot of times that I've acted out in anger with my kids that I've had to come back, before dinner, before we say prayer together, and just say, hey, look, I was wrong. I let my emotions get the best of me. I didn't control that. I gave in, and we talk about that. And then in the prayer, I'll pray to be forgiven for that. I think that's one of the things that really I think we need to get to is and that's in a minute about being with others. But you can never do that. I think that's the key is you can never do that with your kids. You can never do that with a congregation. You can never do that with anybody until you first do it with yourself. Like there has to be a day of personal evaluation that you come to a reckoning with yourself that I've messed all this up. You can learn a lot from the 12-step programs about things. And by the way, we're not talking just sin. Okay, we're talking just mistakes. Okay, I think that's important. This isn't really sin. This is just a lot of times I make mistakes that aren't sins. Okay, the other day I was one of the projects my wife wanted for the 3 years we've been in the house almost, or 2 years. I don't know how long it's been, 2.5 years. Is there's these two doors next to each other for the stairs and the laundry room in the hall, and she's wanted this barn door, and so we were able to get a barn door. I actually got a barn door from my house that's going to be torn down, so I was recycling some wood. Yay me, right? But in the process of cutting some of the wood, I cut one of the door frames. I didn't measure. I assumed they were the same openings. They weren't, and I cut one 2 inches too short. Well, that's not a sin, but one of the things is when I'm sitting there trying to do this and it's not working out, what do I have to do? Hey, I messed up. I didn't come up here and measure this. I did that, right? And so I think that's everything along those lines. I think that's the thing people need to understand. But even with sin, this is the point. In the 12-step programs, they all start off with this kind of realization. I have made these mistakes. I have done this. There's no recovery from failure of any kind without acknowledgement that you're the reason for the failure. And I think that's the hard part.
And then I think we can use this as a partial bridge to our next corner of the topic as a quick illustration. If you are wholly committed to a team, and it doesn't matter if the team is the local church, the shepherds that you serve with, your immediate family, whatever. If you're committed to a team, acknowledging your failures in the concept of that team should be a helpful thing. And here's kind of what I mean by that. If you recognize that I'm responsible for the failure, and you come in and say, hey, this was your corner of the field, this was your part of the thing, and you say, okay, we need to fix this. If I'm team focused, I'm not upset with Terry. I'm upset maybe with my inability to get to that corner quick enough or to forget the set that we are in, but I'll do better next time. But then also the next time is actually better. And the solution may be, okay, like we need to move me around on the field. Like I can't do that job, but maybe I need to be over here on this job because I'm really good at that job and not so great at this job. And if the team matters, then I make the shift. And it may even be as narrow as a need of, on this next trip, you need to stay and watch this because we're all going to go do that. And that's okay too if you're committed to the team. If you're committed to you, then you'll never see success beyond you. But if you're committed to the team, then you're willing to make those sacrifices, those shifts, those changes in order that the team, family, church, eldership, whatever, marriage is stronger and better. That's an extension of, I was wrong, I've admitted to myself. Now I'm going to tell people I was wrong, which is kind of like the next phase of this. Like you've got to be open about your failures beyond just even your family context in very particular ways at times.
Yeah, so I think the two things that paralyze us when it comes to mistakes and get us stuck in a place that we can't recover from. The first is if we're not honest with ourselves. But I think what we misunderstand is it's not whether you're committed to a team or in a team. All of us are in a team. I think that's one of the things we got to overlook. We may not value our teams, but we're all in a team. Whether it's the congregation we're part of, the family we're part of, the work environment we're part of, we're all part of a team. So the second thing is if all you do is be honest with yourself, but you are never honest with others, you are still going to be paralyzed and never be successful in overcoming that because you have not been open. And what you end up doing is, and let's be honest, what that is pride getting in the way, right? We don't want to acknowledge to other people we messed up. So what we do is we suppress that, and in the process of suppressing that and not revealing that, now we start making more mistakes by trying to cover things up because we don't want to admit that we did it wrong. And we get into these mental gymnastics of trying to do the cover-up process. And I think that's the thing to make sure you understand. One of the worst things you can do is go through the first phase of what we're talking about. Be honest that you made a mistake, but then decide that the proper way to handle that is to cover it up and not acknowledge that to anybody else. I have been in situations with Christians where that was the process, that there's a group that came to an acknowledgement they made a mistake. And rather than even being willing to say publicly, hey, we made a mistake, we're going to fix that, there was this way that was developed kind of with a spin to come around and go, oh, here we are, we're going to present you with this opportunity that we hadn't previously planned to do, but it's going to make everything better. And what you don't see is behind that new opportunity that we're presenting as this gift to you is really a problem that arose that we didn't understand, we saw, we messed up. But rather than acknowledge that, what we want to do is we want to give this spin. We make fun of people in politics for the spin jobs all the time, and we do it in our own personal lives all the time. We do it with our kids, we do it with our coworkers, we do it at school, we do it in our churches, we do it in our communities. Rather than just coming out and saying, I messed up, and we're going to fix that, we come up with some reasonable kind of way to keep from having to do that. If that's the way you handle mistakes, you are never going to move past those mistakes. They are going to keep you in bondage for as long as you try to hide them.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge.
And it's one of the things you have to identify is it's not easy in this sense. There's no like, oh, this is going to make it so smooth, because all of the top performers in any area who are aware of the need to admit their failures also have a significant sense of accomplishment and self-worth invested into whatever we're talking about at the moment. And so your emotions are picked at when you either self-identify or because of the prophet to the king relationship, the prophet says, thou art the man. Your emotions are peeled at in there. So there's an emotional aspect to this, but it only gets to the kind of healing it needs if you allow it to go through the full process. And that includes acknowledgement. It may also include contrition to those who you harmed or wronged because of a misjudgment, a misunderstanding, communicative barriers. You know, you say one thing, but you mean another, or vice versa. You mean, you heard something, but they meant something else. And all of those are moments where in the leadership box of your life that you can use either as a lodestone or the cutting of the anchor. What do you want to do? Stay trimmed to the ground or soar? Well, you got to let it go. You got to let it out and process all of that in a helpful and healthy way.
Yeah, you listen. You got to be. I think one of the things about we can learn even from Scripture about sin. And again, not all mistakes are sin, but in the process of overcoming sin, confession to one another plays a vital role in that. This open honesty about your sins to other people to help you is important. And I think that's the same kind of principle here that we're talking about. And it's a biblical principle to come out and say, okay, I messed up. I did this wrong. I've not handled things right. And we want to keep this to 30 minutes. I think one of the things I want to point out too is, especially for preachers, because that was initially our work here and the focus in a lot of ways. And even elders, there's this mentality. I grew up thinking in churches that preachers were just basically perfection. You never heard, and I don't know, Phil, you didn't grow up in the church. Obviously your story's different than mine, but I never heard growing up as a kid a preacher confess sin, a preacher acknowledge making a mistake. I rarely heard the eldership where I was at say, we didn't make the best decision, we're going to fix that. there was, at least to me, in what I felt like, there was this kind of understanding of leadership that the way to lead a group of people was to present yourself as being without flaw, so you had the credibility to lead, because acknowledging any kind of mistake discredited your ability to lead. I'm going to tell you, I think that's completely bogus. I think being unable to acknowledge your mistakes, publicly identify them, be honest about them, and even apologize for them, the inability or the unwillingness to do that is what discredits your leadership. True leaders can look and say, we made a mistake. We're going to fix it. We're sorry that we made that mistake. Pray for us, and we'll do what's best in the future. I have heard in my time of preaching those in leadership say, well, we're not going to apologize because we are in leadership and we don't make mistakes because we're the leaders. That, by the way, is a tremendous mistake. And if that's how you approach leadership, you will lose those from following you. I think that's the thing I want you to understand, is that we want to follow people who are genuine and real. We know you are not perfect, so stop acting that way. Yeah. That's a flawed approach.
Both your children and the flock are acutely aware of the weaknesses of those who lead the family of God or the family in the home.
Yeah.
I will say it this way. I think we are afraid, we are fearful of acknowledging our mistakes, because for the evangelist, you're afraid that maybe no one will listen to you, or the elders will tell you, we've determined that your place in the kingdom is somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know,
they'll publicly acknowledge they made a mistake in asking you to work with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to the dad, they're like, I'm afraid they won't listen to me later. Or to the elder, to the flock, they won't, listen to the next time I ask them. Well, all that information is on the table. What you actually are doing is building a larger cliff to fall off of in the future. Because when you fall, great will be the fall, because there's a actual fake pillar that you've climbed up on. And it's easier and easier for that more and more rickety structure to be destroyed by even a lesser mistake than any of the mistakes you could have acknowledged in the past. For the elders, for the preacher, for the dad. That's a more realistic thing. Now, it doesn't mean, again, that any of those conversations get easier, nor does it mean you open up the floodgates and become just a transparent sieve that lets all the dirt of every single circumstance roll forth. But
please have a filter.
But it does.
Please have a filter.
But it does mean that there is value in the contextual apology. That means you apologize to the right people for the right things at the right reasons.
Yeah.
I don't need to apologize for something somebody else did. I need to empathize with those who have been hurt. And that empathy might even say, I'm sorry this has happened. I'm sorry they have done this. I'm sorry that you are hurt. That's not an apology in the sense of I did this, but maybe I allowed it.
Yeah. Make sure it's a real apology. Can we say that? I think I want to throw that out there. I'm sorry that I upset you, or I'm sorry that you felt that way, is not an apology. Mm-hmm. So make sure when you move forward to make an apology, it's actually a real, genuine apology. Because when I tell my kids, I'm sorry I upset you, they know what I just did. I just said, hey, I'm sorry this happened, but it's still your fault because you're weak. That's what I'm saying.
And look, turn the tables around. Sometimes we do get upset at things that are actually our problem, and we project them on others, like we pointed out. And so by being more clear, that context, the context of your apology, then you open the door of becoming a better human being, and a better disciple of Jesus, and a better father and a better preacher and a better elder and better whatever it is that matters in your immediate sphere of influence. And, Terry and I can say this. I don't know, I'll say it. I'm sorry for some of the sermons I've preached over the years. There's no need to quantify that, because some of those sermons were pretty sorry.
Yeah. I apologize.
But I think here's some other things. We've kind of narrowed the focus of preachers, and there's a reason for that too, because of our narrowed focus in this kind of realm that we're in. But now go forth and think about what you're asking people to do as a response to a sermon. You're basically on a weekly basis exhorting people to say, I'm sorry, and to mean it, and to not have worldly sorrow, but to develop in themselves godly sorrow. And so being able to articulate the internal mechanisms of a solid apology shouldn't be complicated for us. Like, we should be able to say, look, this is what it is. This is how, because if we can't do it, why do we expect anyone else to do it? If we won't do it, why would we expect anyone else to do it? That's leadership 101.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this is so critical to churches today, personally, that we just realize, I think the thing is that elderships, for example, are not infallible. And there's going to be sometimes we're doing the best we can with what we know. Sometimes we don't do the best. I mean, sometimes we're doing a good job. We could do better, but because of time and other things. I'll use an example. Maybe in the process of selecting a book for a Bible class, right, for some teacher, you kind of glance at that, and it's not until you go through the study that you find out there's actually something in that book that you don't really want taught. How do you handle that? Well, you just say, hey, you know what? We glanced at this. We didn't really look at it as well as we thought. We made a mistake, and we'll do better, right? Sometimes that's just all it takes. Those aren't life-changing deals, but I tell you this, you're better off to acknowledge that and to make that comment rather publicly and to say, here's a mistake we made, we'll work on it, than to pretend like it didn't happen. And meanwhile, everybody's talking behind the scenes going, why did they let us study this book that says whatever it says? I'm not going to create some bad example that I'll get criticized for publicly. That turns Joseph into some scallywag instead of the VBS hero. I'll pick on Jared Saltz. Why did he let that happen? And you. At the end of the day, though, it's one of those deals that what I'm saying is just acknowledge it, just move forward and say, hey, we messed up. It's way better to do that than to act like, well, you guys just don't understand what we understand, and this was the best decision. There was no other stuff out there, McPherson up in Bowling Green says COVID has forced or allowed decision makers to humbly say we're operating in unprecedented times here. I'm going to say this, and I may get in trouble. We are operating in unprecedented times, but I think sometimes there's more information, and we don't take the time to seek it out, and we allow that to be an excuse to defend ourselves, rather than saying we didn't properly seek this out. They are unprecedented times, and there's a lot of misinformation. And you and I talk a lot about this privately. It's really hard to swim through these waters. It takes some work. Just understanding what should be simple things takes half an hour to an hour sometimes. I think you, like me, sometimes get frustrated. It feels like that's all you talk about or look at is COVID junk at this point. But I also know of some decisions that are being made without very much true research, but rather more anecdotal things like, well, I don't know anybody that's died from COVID. We're fine. If that's the extent of the decision making and we make, it's just anecdotal and don't take things into account. And I know this is harsh, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, but if that's kind of what you're doing, and then you have a problem, you need to own up to that problem and just say, look, we obviously made a mistake. We thought we were okay. We weren't. That's what it's going to take. Rather than saying, well, these are unprecedented times. We didn't understand what we were doing. And I know that some disagree with me, but I will tell you, I think that's one of the things we've got to acknowledge. We're going to make mistakes through all of this, which gets a whole different discussion, by the way, of science and how that is and being wrong. And I think there's a great, I think it was Walter Harrington did a really good article about that idea and that concept.
Yeah, I think we might be getting close to our close time here, Terry, and we'll probably wrap things up in a moment. I remember back to one of the early business meetings I was part of for the Wilsonville Church of Christ in Wilsonville, Oregon. One of the members there, Alan Ingram, got up and kind of helped the church there make a decision. And the decision tree that was involved was not whether we were going to help someone, but within our budget, how much we would be able to help them. And there was a lot of back and forth on related matters. And on some level, there was an importance to them. And so we probably spent like 2 hours at that point. He gets up, gets on the whiteboard and says, what we're actually deciding between, and I'll synthesize this down, is whether we're going to help this person $400 or $500, like at the end of it. And he said, and we've got $600. Why are we still here? And we're like, sounds good, $500, we're done. The reason I say that is we will often devote a tremendous amount of time to determine a small thing. And when a big thing happens, we are emotionally unwilling to invest even an equal amount of time for the small things into the actual big things, because the big things make us uncomfortable. I think the better we can be at saying, yeah, we made a mistake, then we resolve the problem quicker and we build a better relationship and we become better leaders than trying to act like it didn't happen, use confirmation bias and pretend like that wasn't the actual issue, it was something else. It was this random X factor we didn't plan for that came in and destroyed all of our work, when it was actually, we just had a bad plan. Like sometimes your plans are bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just say it.
Maybe we have a new plan next time.
By the way, I think one of the other things to add into here is learn to say you don't know, but you'll check into something. Like most of the mistakes I've made in public teaching is because I tried to give an answer without actually doing the work. Mm-hmm. That was when I was young and stupid. Don't do that, right? Because that's learning from your mistakes. And I think just throw that out there. Sometimes the answer is, hey, we're working on it. We don't know. You don't have to give an answer for everything. And I learned from a friend of mine years ago at a Chinese buffet when talking about some things where he said, I don't have to have a position on everything. Sometimes the answer is I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's one of the valuable lessons you learn from mistakes going forward, is you don't have to have an answer all the time. That will prevent you from stepping into something that you'll have difficulty getting out of.
But Terry, there was a pandemic back in 18. Yeah.
18.
And should we have a policy for that?
Yeah.
All right.
That's another discussion.
COVID-19 again. That was just too much low-hanging fruit right there.
Yeah.
I do want to thank everyone for participating. And I believe that this is an area where not only can we as evangelists get better, but Terry and I can get better as people. And we want to encourage you to try to get better as people in regards to admitting failure, publicly acknowledging failure, but then learning from it to get better, to do more, and to be able to do the work more effectively and in the kingdom. Terry, last comments?
Oh, I just want you guys to I think my thing for people is, I preached this past Sunday about Barnabas, and I did that purposely because I think that we're surrounded enough with discouragement right now. And what we really need is people that are encouragers. That's what Barnabas was really good at. And just go be a Barnabas today. See the good in people. Be patient with one another. Put others' needs above your own, and do something positive. Stop complaining. Stop being consumed with negativity, and lift other people up. That's what we need today more than ever.
All right, everyone. I encourage you to have a great day. As we have said many times, and will continue to say, God certainly is desiring to bless you with every spiritual blessing. And if Terry or I or others in the community of believers can be of encouragement to you, we want to do that. Please focus in on spiritual things. Please take care of your life spiritually first. But if there's some way we can serve you in that process, just let us know. We are more than happy to help. Have a great day.